I'm sorry, Miss Cole. Your name was removed from the final guest list.
Removed? My children's program was invited by the Vail Foundation.
I understand, but the instruction came directly from senior administration.
Daddy!
Sophie?
Daddy! It's her! Daddy, that's her.
Who?
The lady who saved me.
Welcome to Tales Through Time, where love is tested, secrets are exposed, and even broken hearts can find their way home.
Sweetheart, wait here for me. I need to speak to someone for just a minute.
Okay, Aunt Victoria.
You can have a cookie while you wait. I'll be right back. Can we speak somewhere private? Something isn't right with the foundation grants.
What do you mean?
Our records say we received more than twice what actually reached us.
Will I see my daddy again?
Yes, sweetheart, you will. But keep those eyes open for me, okay? Your daddy is gonna see you again.
The lady who saved me.
We searched for you.
For me?
I kept telling Daddy he wasn't looking properly.
For almost 2 years. I owe you more than I can say.
You don't owe me anything.
Then let me make a donation to your center.
I didn't save your daughter so somebody could write my organization a check.
Can you come inside with us?
Not tonight, sweetheart. I think I'm going home.
Your name should never have been removed.
I agree.
Victoria told me she was with Sophie when the reaction started.
No, your daughter was alone when I found her.
Alone?
Good night, Sophie.
Victoria had not always been close to Sebastian. She was his older half-sister, and for years their lives had barely overlapped. That changed after Sebastian's wife died. Sophie was 4. Sebastian could negotiate billion-dollar deals without hesitation, but grief reduced ordinary mornings to chaos. Victoria stepped in. School runs, doctor's appointments, dance classes, birthdays. Sebastian almost forgot. When work took him abroad, Victoria stayed with Sophie, and Margaret encouraged it. Sophie needs family around her, she told Sebastian. Let your sister help. Sophie began calling for Aunt Victoria whenever Sebastian wasn't available. The trust came gradually. So gradually, Sebastian never noticed when Victoria stopped being a visitor and became part of the machinery of his life. She eventually took a senior position inside the Vail Foundation. Around the same period, Sebastian completed arrangements for Sophie to inherit control of the Vail family legacy when she was old enough. To Sebastian, it was simply protecting his daughter's future. Nothing more. Victoria knew about the arrangement. Nobody considered that unusual. She was family, and when Victoria later admitted privately to Margaret that she'd made a disastrous investment and temporarily moved foundation money between accounts, Margaret was furious, but Victoria insisted she'd only borrowed it. She would replace every dollar. Margaret quietly helped cover part of the shortfall. Once she warned her daughter. Victoria cried, promised. Margaret believed she'd prevented a financial scandal. What she could never have imagined was that money would eventually be the least frightening thing Victoria had hidden. Sophie got her visit the following afternoon. Ariana welcomed her. Sebastian was merely tolerated. Sophie brought a drawing she'd made of Ariana beside an ambulance. Ariana laughed when she saw it. You made me very tall. You were tall. I was wearing heels. Sophie considered this. Still counts. Sebastian watched them together. It was the first time he understood why his daughter had remembered Ariana for 2 years. Before leaving, he asked the question he'd been carrying since the gala. What exactly happened before you found Sophie? Ariana's smile disappeared. I found her alone near the dessert tables. Victoria said she'd only stepped away after Sophie started reacting. No. How long was Sophie alone? I don't know, but nobody was watching her when I reached her. That evening, Sebastian confronted Victoria. She broke down almost immediately. Yes, she had left Sophie. A major donor had called. There was a crisis with an event sponsor. She thought she'd be gone for 2 minutes. It became 15. I came back and she was in an ambulance. Sebastian stared at her. You told me you were beside her. I was ashamed. For 2 years? You had just buried your wife, Sebastian. Sophie nearly died while she was in my care. I thought you'd never let me near her again. Margaret stepped in. Your sister made a terrible mistake. She lied to me. She was frightened. Sophie could have died. And Victoria has punished herself for that every day since. Sebastian looked at his mother. Margaret continued quietly. Do not turn one terrible act of negligence into proof that she doesn't love Sophie. Sebastian wanted that explanation to be enough. And for a little while, it was. Later that evening, Sophie wandered into Victoria's room. Are you mad at Daddy? Victoria's face softened instantly. Never, sweetheart. Sophie hugged her. Victoria held her tightly. I love you. I love you too. Sophie skipped out again. Victoria watched the doorway, and once she was alone, the smile disappeared from her face. Ariana had no intention of becoming part of the Vail family. Sophie had no intention of respecting that plan. 3 days later, she wanted to visit again, then again the following week. Once Sebastian said he had meetings, Sophie came downstairs wearing her coat anyway. I'll wait. For what? For you to stop working. He laughed despite himself. Soon Sebastian found himself at Ariana's children's center far more often than he'd expected. Ariana remained warm with Sophie and careful with him. When he offered funding again, she said, Your daughter can spend time here without everything becoming a transaction. Then another complaint reached Ariana. A shelter had supposedly received a Vail Foundation grant of $120,000. The director swore they had received less than half. Ariana pulled out the notes she'd kept from the reception 2 years earlier. Same foundation, same problem, different children. This time, she called Sebastian. I need you to look at something. For the first time, Ariana wasn't speaking to him because Sophie had dragged him into the room. She was speaking to him because something was wrong. Before Sebastian could begin examining the grant records properly, Sophie found something else. Margaret had recently given her several old handbags for dress-up. One Saturday, Sophie opened a zipped compartment inside a small black evening bag. A card was caught behind the lining. She pulled it free, then stared at the name. Ariana Cole. Grandma, Margaret came into the room. I found Ariana! Margaret took the card. Her expression changed immediately. She recognized the handbag. Victoria had carried it to the charity reception 2 years earlier. Sebastian arrived less than an hour later. The phone number still worked. The address belonged to Ariana's center. There had never been false information. There had never been an impossible search. Victoria had possessed the answer from the beginning. When Sebastian confronted her, she whispered, I can explain. You told me you couldn't find her. I panicked. For 2 years. I knew she'd tell you I'd left Sophie alone. You stood beside my daughter every time she asked whether we'd found Ariana and lied to her. Victoria started crying. Margaret closed her eyes, then said, What Victoria did was cruel. Sebastian stared at his mother. Margaret continued, But shame makes people cowardly. Sebastian looked at Victoria. Once again, his mother had an explanation. Once again. Victoria's lie seemed just believable enough to survive. Ariana reacted differently when Sebastian told her about the card. She wasn't angry because Victoria had prevented Sebastian from finding her. She had never asked to be found. What angered her was Sophie. That child spent 2 years thinking I disappeared. Sebastian said nothing. Ariana continued. Victoria used Sophie's feelings to protect herself. He didn't defend his sister. That mattered. Then Ariana placed the grant complaints in front of him. Several children's organizations had received far less than the Vail Foundation publicly claimed to have given them. Sebastian opened the internal records. The discrepancies were real, so Ariana began helping him trace the payments. Not because she wanted access to his world, because she knew the people whose programs had lost money. She knew which children had gone without tutors, which shelters had canceled meals, which staff members had worked unpaid. Long evenings followed, receipts, grant letters, phone calls, old payment schedules. Somewhere between one missing transfer and another, Sebastian stopped being the billionaire Ariana preferred to avoid. He became a father ashamed that children had been hurt under his family's name. And Ariana stopped being the mysterious woman Sebastian had spent 2 years searching for. She became the person across the table who told him the truth, even when it hurt. When Sebastian suggested letting the family's accountants handle the investigation, Ariana shook her head. You don't need someone loyal to your family. What do I need? Someone loyal to the facts. The next morning, Sebastian ordered an independent audit. The preliminary report arrived quickly. Grant amounts had been altered. Funds had passed through temporary accounts before reaching charities. Several transfers were linked to a private investment vehicle. One authorization appeared again and again. Victoria Vale. Sebastian read the report twice, then called his sister and mother to the house. Victoria didn't deny it. I was going to put it back. With what? My investment was supposed to recover. You gambled money meant for children. I made a mistake. Sebastian turned toward Margaret. His mother wouldn't meet his eyes. He knew immediately. You knew? Margaret's face broke. Not everything. How much? Enough. The room went silent. Margaret explained that Victoria had come to her after the investment began collapsing. She claimed she'd temporarily borrowed foundation funds. Margaret helped replace part of the money before auditors could notice. I thought I was protecting the foundation. You were protecting Victoria. I was protecting both. Ariana stood quietly near the doorway. Margaret looked at her, ashamed now. I thought she had made one terrible financial decision. Suddenly, Sebastian believed he understood everything. Ariana had overheard questions about missing charity funds on the same night Sophie nearly died. Victoria knew that if Sebastian ever found Ariana, she might eventually expose both the negligence and the missing money. That was why Victoria had hidden the card. That was why she had controlled the search. The answer was ugly, but it finally seemed complete. Sebastian suspended Victoria from the foundation. Every affected charity would be repaid. An outside board would oversee the investigation. But Margaret still resisted what she believed Sebastian was beginning to think. She stole money, he said. She moved money she thought she could replace. She lied about Ariana, because Ariana could expose her. She lied about Sophie. Margaret hesitated. Then, because she was ashamed, Sebastian looked at her. You still believe her? Margaret's eyes filled. I watched your sister rebuild this family after your wife died. That doesn't erase what she did. No, but it matters. Ariana understood Margaret better than Sebastian did in that moment. Margaret wasn't stupid. She wasn't blind to Victoria's wrongdoing. She was simply convinced there had to be a line her daughter would never cross. That evening, Sebastian drove Ariana home. For several minutes, neither spoke. Finally, he asked, How do you know when you've learned everything about someone? Ariana looked through the window. You don't, he smiled faintly. Comforting. You decide what the evidence proves, not what you hope is true. He glanced at her. And what does the evidence prove about me? Ariana looked back at him. That you keep asking questions even when you know the answers might hurt. It was the first compliment she'd given him. Sebastian remembered it. Victoria admitted the fund diversion. She admitted hiding Ariana's card. She admitted lying about being beside Sophie. She insisted all three things came from the same chain of panic. One financial mistake. One moment of negligence. Then years spent hiding both. Margaret believed her. Even Sebastian began to wonder whether there was anything left to uncover. Then the independent auditors found the name of a financial advisor Victoria had used during the year of Sophie's allergic reaction. He had left the country shortly afterward. When contacted, he agreed to cooperate. Most of what he had concerned the diverted funds. But he told investigators he'd also kept several recordings. Victoria had started blaming him as the investment collapsed, so he'd begun recording their calls to protect himself. One recording, he said, had nothing to do with investments. The date was 8 days before Sophie's allergic reaction. Sebastian's attorney called him immediately. There is something you need to hear. Sebastian asked one question. Is it about the foundation? The attorney hesitated. No. Then what is it about? Another pause. Your daughter. Sebastian listened with Margaret beside him. Ariana hadn't planned to be there. Sebastian asked her to stay. The recording began with Victoria asking about an old provision in the Vail family trust. Her financial advisor sounded impatient. If Sophie reaches the transfer age, control passes permanently to her. We've already discussed this. And if she doesn't? What do you mean, if she never reaches it? A pause. The advisor answered more carefully. Then the contingent family beneficiary receives the interest, which is me. Yes. Margaret slowly turned toward Sebastian. Nobody spoke. On the recording, Victoria continued. Then came the sentence that emptied the room of air. She has a severe allergy. The advisor went silent. What does that have to do with anything? One crowded reception, one dessert table, her injector stays with me. Margaret covered her mouth. The advisor sounded horrified. Victoria, what exactly are you suggesting? I don't need anyone to touch her. You're talking about killing a child. No. Victoria's voice remained eerily calm. I'm talking about letting an allergy do what everyone already knows it can do. Sebastian gripped the edge of the table. Then Victoria said, Everyone will call it a tragedy. The advisor whispered, And if somebody notices, I only need enough time before they do. The recording ended. No one moved. For 2 years, Sebastian had believed his sister had neglected Sophie. Margaret had defended her because negligence could be forgiven. But Sophie had never been accidentally left alone. Victoria had chosen the gala, chosen the moment, kept the medication with herself, and walked away, expecting her niece not to survive. Once investigators knew what to look for, the remaining evidence stopped looking innocent. Victoria had personally requested the catering allergen list before the reception. She knew which desserts contained Sophie's trigger. She had changed Sophie's usual medication arrangements that evening, so the emergency injector remained in her handbag. She knew Sebastian would be overseas, and she'd insisted she would personally take Sophie to the event. Then she'd separated from her at exactly the moment the dessert service began. Ariana had not saved Sophie from an unfortunate accident. She had interrupted an attempted murder, and now the card made sense in an entirely different way. Victoria hadn't hidden Ariana merely because Ariana knew about missing money. Ariana was the unexpected witness who had ruined everything. The woman Sebastian would naturally want to meet. The woman who might tell him Sophie had been left alone. The woman whose existence forced Victoria to spend the next 2 years controlling the search. Margaret asked to see her daughter. When Victoria entered the room, Margaret looked at her for a long time. Mom, I defended you. Victoria began crying. Please let me explain. I paid back money you stole. Mom, I told Sebastian you loved Sophie. I do love her. Margaret recoiled. No. Her voice broke. You loved what came after her. Victoria shook her head. Margaret's tears finally fell. I helped hide what you stole because I thought money was the worst thing you had taken from this family. She looked at her daughter as though she no longer knew her. You were waiting for my granddaughter to die. Victoria had no explanation left. When investigators entered, Margaret stepped aside. Victoria was arrested. The recording established intent. The catering records showed preparation. The medication changes showed planning. The financial records supplied the motive investigators had been missing. And her 2-year effort to conceal Ariana showed what she'd done afterward to protect herself. The foundation fraud became another case entirely. Margaret cooperated fully, even when it meant admitting she had helped conceal part of Victoria's financial misconduct. She resigned from every formal role connected to the foundation. Sebastian didn't use the Vail attorneys to shield either woman. He told investigators the same thing Ariana had told him. Follow the facts. Victoria eventually accepted a plea agreement that carried a lengthy prison sentence for the attempt on Sophie's life and the financial crimes surrounding the foundation. The Vail Foundation was rebuilt under an independent board. Every missing grant was restored. Ariana initially refused Sebastian's invitation to join its oversight committee. Then she reconsidered, not because his name was attached to it, because she wanted somebody inside that room who would ask where every dollar meant for a child had actually gone. Margaret began visiting Ariana's center too. She never asked anyone to excuse what she'd done. One afternoon, Ariana found her watching Sophie read beside another little girl. Margaret said quietly, "I kept thinking love meant standing beside your family." Ariana sat beside her. Margaret looked at Sophie. "I should have learned sooner that sometimes love means standing in their way." Ariana didn't answer. There was nothing to add. By spring, Ariana's center had expanded. Not because Sebastian bought it. The program earned new grants through the independent process Ariana had helped create. Sophie remained its most enthusiastic unofficial volunteer, and Sebastian kept showing up, sometimes because Sophie demanded it, eventually because he wanted to. He learned to repair shelves instead of replacing entire rooms. He learned which children cheated at board games. He learned Ariana hated coffee after 4 in the afternoon. And Ariana learned that Sebastian Vale was much easier to like once he stopped trying to solve everything with money. Neither of them rushed what was growing between them. Enough of their lives had already been shaped by secrets and people deciding things for them. One evening, the center was almost empty. Ariana was stacking books when Sophie climbed onto the table beside her. "Can I ask you something?" "You normally do." Sophie smiled. "Do you know what I wished for after you saved me?" Ariana pretended to think. "That you'd never have to eat another cookie?" Sophie burst out laughing. "No." "Worth a guess." Sophie looked across the room toward Sebastian, then back at Ariana. "I wish Daddy would find you." Ariana's smile softened. "He did eventually." Sophie shook her head very seriously. "No." She pointed to herself. "I found you." Sebastian laughed from across the room. "That is unfortunately true." Sophie jumped from the table and ran toward the shelves. Sebastian walked over. For a moment, neither he nor Ariana spoke. Then he smiled. 2 years. Ariana raised an eyebrow. "You're not very good at searching." "I had the wrong person helping me." The humor faded gently from his face. Then he looked toward Sophie. "But she wasn't wrong." "About what?" Sebastian looked back at Ariana. "She wasn't the only one who needed finding." Ariana said nothing. She didn't need to. Sebastian reached for her hand. This time, she let him take it. Across the room, Sophie noticed, and smiled. Because the little girl everyone believed Ariana had saved only once had spent 2 years refusing to forget her. And in the end, Sophie had done what her father never could. She had brought Ariana back, not to repay a debt, not to expose a secret, but to become part of a family that had almost lost everything before realizing the person they had been searching for had never been hiding at all.